Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Adyton Resources corporate webinar. This is Paul Amputis from RBMG. Adyton Resources trades on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol ADY. Joining us today is the company's chairman, president, and CEO, Frank Terranova, who will go through Adyton's May presentation, including an overview of current operations and upcoming milestones. At the end of the presentation, we will open it up for questions for management to address. If you are interested in asking a question and are logged into the GoToWebinar app or web platform, you can submit your questions to us directly in the questions module. Please note, this presentation is being recorded today, May 12th, and will soon be made available on the company's website. Today's call may contain forward-looking statements that are subject to risks and uncertainties that may cause actual results, performance, or developments to differ materially from those contained in the statements and are not guarantees of future performance of the company. No assurance can be given that any of the events anticipated by the forward-looking statements will occur, or if they do occur, what benefits the company will obtain from them. Also, some risks and uncertainties may be out of the control of the company. Adyton's full disclaimer is available on slide 2 of the presentation. Lastly, RBMG is not a registered investment advisor or broker-dealer. For more information, please visit us at rbmilestone.com. It is now my pleasure to introduce you Frank Terranova. Frank.
Wonderful, and thank you everybody for taking the time to dial in and listen to the presentation, and for our hosts in facilitating it. This afternoon and this morning, depending on what time zone you're in, I'll briefly go through the Adyton story. It is a very new story, having listed on the TSX Ventures Exchange in late February 2021, having acquired the assets in late 2020. Our investment proposition in putting the company together and utilising decades of experience amongst the team is to fundamentally look through the lens of how investors picture these type of companies and what they look for. So our initial proposition was to look for world-class mineral jurisdictions, to find projects that were materially undervalued, but yet had sufficient scale as a starting position. So we start with 1.15 million ounces of inferred resource in a jurisdiction that is globally regarded to have the capacity to grow and increase to one's ounce count very quickly. We have a proven management team with decades of experience, and I'll touch on that with respect to how we identify value and what we look for in projects. Our two key flagship projects that I'll touch on predominantly today is Feni Island and Ferguson Island. We have an abundance of other projects, but I'll only touch on that very briefly. With respect to ESG principles, in this day and age, yes, they can largely be taken as a given. When you are in a foreign jurisdiction, you are there by invitation. So the management team has an abundance of experience and know-how in operating in developing countries, particularly in PNG. Fundamentally, our mantra or philosophy is pretty simple. Just do what you say you're going to do, and stakeholders, government and various regulators fundamentally let you get on with the business of developing assets and enhancing a company. We do engage and we pride ourselves on partnering with reputable counterparts, be it drilling companies, labour hire companies, investor relations and investment banking counterparts, because at the end of the day, no different to engaging with our landowners and stakeholders, quality counts. The team itself, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but obviously there's myself. I've had an abundance of experience in building companies and growing them organically through internal growth or through M&A activity. The last foray into PNG was with a company called Allied Gold in the late 2000s. The team there grew the company from a $50 million market cap to an $800 million market cap over a 4-year period, and the company was subsequently acquired for circa $600 million by a mid-tier gold producer. Rod is our Executive Director and Chief Geologist. Stephen has an abundance of international experience across various markets. And the one thing we pride ourselves on is that we never assume that we are the font of all knowledge. We surround ourselves with experienced operators, reputable operators, and on our advisory team, we have Peter, who runs the K2 mine in PNG, which is a global success story. Jason, who has an abundance of experience in advising the board on North American markets and the mining sector. Tom's worked for the World Bank and for a number of other global mining companies. And the board themselves, a geographic spread, all bringing a particular skill set, and we are a very hands-on, roll up our sleeves type of culture and organisation. One element, and look, we went to PNG insofar as looking for projects. It is a global tier 1 mining jurisdiction. That is beyond dispute. You look at the style of assets and the scale of assets, multi-million ounce gold producers, millions of tonnes of copper. We've omitted on this slide, otherwise it would simply be too busy and congested. The $1 billion LNG gas projects, the $1 billion nickel projects. It is truly on the mining monopoly board. This is, in the right part of the space. It is premium ground. We have two operations or assets that we're focusing on here: Feni Island, which I'll touch on in a moment, and Ferguson Island. We've specifically chosen island settings for our first suite of projects. Logistically, they are a simple activity to procure and provide goods, services, etc. To the teams. And equally, in this particularly challenging times of COVID, we've been fundamentally unaffected being on remote island locations to date. So it has not inhibited our current drilling operations. But largely PNG, people have become far more familiar with it. It is open for business and it is very, very pro-mining and development. Now, an important element when I refer to management identifying value, and this is the style of assets that we were attracted to were those that were fundamentally neglected by circumstance. And by that we mean that they were owned by companies, organisations that simply had other pressing priorities or other minerals and resources that were core to their underlying operations. So we went looking, we found a suite of assets that very little work had been done on them for the past 7 to 10 years, and inherently though they had a substantial amount of historical spend, a good database and a good position to launch from. Both projects were drill ready, and that was another important aspect so that we could get on to the ground very quickly and start drilling. Now, another particular point with respect to Feni and Ferguson Islands, again, looking through the lens of what investors look for. When the market is very hot, investors encourage companies to look for that elephant in the jungle, to look for that asset that 1 or 2 drill holes, you have a company making game changer. On the other side of that coin, when the market is a bit more neutral, investors want near-term cash flow production. We've constructed a portfolio that has one of each, and Feni is our elephant in the jungle, and I'll touch on that on this presentation. And as you can see, it's located within the Lihir volcanic arc. Again, a wonderful bit of geological real estate. We have Simberi, which was the allied gold asset that we developed in the late 2000s, 5 million ounces, run by a mid-tier producer, St Barbara, for the past 7 to 8 years. A wonderful asset and abundant again in gold accordingly. Next is Lihir, a globally recognised Tier 1 gold giant, 60 million ounces and continuing. We then have our project Feni, and further south the Bougainville or Panguna copper mine, which is regarded as one of the best in the world. An important feature and a question that we asked ourselves, and every investor should be asking themselves as well, is that if this project has the potential in which we believe in it, why hasn't it been developed or advanced to date? And put simply, historically within PNG, you had the capacity to land bank, peg a lot of ground, hold it with minimal cost, and basically use it as a form of option within one's portfolio. The government, the regulators, and of course the landowners over the number of years have simply been far more diligent in imposing a use it or lose it approach. Therefore, if you don't develop and advance the ground, fundamentally it's at risk of being forfeited. That provides opportunity, that provides the ability to negotiate deals, and hence we've picked up two wonderful assets where the current owners, who are fundamentally concentrating on their core assets, saw the opportunity to vend these projects into our company and maintain an exposure to the underlying asset. With Feni in particular, these style of collapsed volcanoes, our exploration team have done a wonderful job in reinterpreting a lot of the historical data. As I say, either the geologists are getting smarter or the technology is getting sufficiently better. I'd like to think it's a bit of both, but our team has reinterpreted a lot of the historical IP, and you'll see on this slide the orange or red shading amongst the historical drilling results. That's the 650,000 ounce starting position that we've acquired. But you'll also see an anomaly, which we think is a fantastic copper porphyry target that has been picked up. Now, you wouldn't have seen this decades ago. So fundamentally, it is something that our team has picked up on and is now honing in and ready to drill. And as you see it here, the historical drilling has been circa 100 to 150 metres. For those who understand these style of assets or projects, the prize tends to be a little bit deeper. So we are embarking, we're basically ready to start drilling within the next 5 to 10 days. The team has arrived on site, and we're getting ready to sink some 300, 400, 500 metre holes to really test this proposition. Best case scenario, we hit a copper porphyry target, and it is a game changer, as I alluded to. I'll also take second prize, where we're testing the existing 650,000 ounces and we're simply adding to them. And that's the one thing in PNG and why we were attracted to this style of asset or suite of assets, is that if you are disciplined and have a dedicated methodology through your exploration programs, the ounces will come. It's not a matter of if, it is simply a matter of when, and a function of your drilling campaign. One element that we've underplayed on Feni is the copper signature, and inherently a lot of the previous work that had been done didn't really focus on it. So our team is looking, we'll take the results, look at it in a little bit more detail and truly understand the copper potential, given that it is in that Lihir volcanic arc region where the trend is the more south you go, the more copper you find in these assets. Ferguson Island, on the other hand, this is the near-term cash-producing asset. We acquired it. We beat a number of larger companies to the finish line to procure it. And the reason there was an enormous amount of interest is, again, 500,000 ounce starting position, very shallow. So therefore, I'll touch on that in a moment, which indicates that the mining will be relatively straightforward. Not a lot of work done on it in the past 5 to 10 years for the same reasons. It had simply been land banked, but from our perspective, it is a wonderful complementing asset to Feni. The historical results on one of the deposits, Gamma, and what you'll see, fantastic grades for an open pit style project or mining operation. Within the resource, a lot of the historical drilling still quite shallow, 50, 60, 70 metres, give or take. But fundamentally, as you can see, on the side of a hill or small mountain, all of the historical results fundamentally, finishing in mineralisation. So we've been drilling there for the past couple of weeks. We've started to release results, and the underlying objective of the initial drill program was to confirm that the historical results were accurate, that we had actually gotten what we believed we had bought and paid for, and to really enhance the confidence in the results so we can accelerate to technical studies and progress the project accordingly. And what we found in our first 3 holes that we've reported on, and we're intending to do a circa 25 to 30 hole program, both from a validation perspective as well as broadly stepping out. So, confirming the historical results as well as adding to them. The first 3 results, I must say, not only met but exceeded our expectations. Substantially better grades, and from that perspective, truly confirming at this stage what we expected and actually exceeding it. So from that side of things, again, we'll have additional drill results being reported over the next couple of weeks, and then probably on a fortnightly basis for over the remainder of May and the start of June. The sister deposit, which is circa 20 miles away from Gamma, is Wapaloo. Again, fantastic grades, fantastic opportunities because they are at surface. We're likely to only sink 3 or 4 holes as part of this program on this deposit. Again, fundamentally to validate and assure ourselves of the pedigree of the historical results. This deposit actually produced gold in the mid-90s via small trial mining. We inherited an abundance of feasibility studies and at a PEA and actually at a definitive level, we're simply polishing up the assumptions, retesting them, and again, not only was this project drill ready, but largely on the road to being development study ready. And an example of this, and I suppose when one looks at the cutoff grades with respect to the minimum grade that we factor into our underlying resources. All our resources have an independent 43-101 technical report that was independently written. The authors of that report suggested that we could use a lower cutoff grade. Operating assets around us used down to 0.2, 0.3. The average is probably around 0.5. We're using 0.8 for a number of reasons. Fundamentally, we are genuinely committed to wrapping some economics around these projects, particularly Ferguson Island, once we complete the first drilling program. We are conservative by nature, and the reason for that is that we are legitimately focused on developing this or progressing these assets and really seeing what their true potential is. We're not interested in looking at assets that a $20 move in the gold price is the difference between lights on or lights off. Anything that we look at, we make sure that it passes the next gate from the application of capital or decision-making process, and the conservative nature of our economic assumptions ensures that we're not wasting our time or our shareholders' time. Our work program, and it's something that we pride ourselves on, time is money. Investors don't want to invest in companies that are simply dormant or meandering along at a very insignificant pace. Our methodology and philosophy is sprint to the next decision-making point, see whether you have sufficient information to go the next step. There is no point in dragging it out. So we were often criticised in doing both projects at the same time. Our philosophy is we like to get to the accident quickly, so to speak. On Ferguson Island, we envisaged the 3,000 metre drilling program to be completed by the end of August or early September. We'll have that done by the latter part of May, mid-June at the latest, for two reasons. Yet again, time is money. But secondly, with the situation in the region and globally with COVID, rather than having a fly-in, fly-out approach to our workforce, our approach is simple. When you get on the islands, you stay on the islands, the team gets the job done, and then they move on. So we're already running ahead of schedule on Ferguson Island. On Feni, we've just embarked on the first part of the drilling program. The drill rigs should be turning within 5 to 7 days. So there is an abundance of news flow that is coming over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And that bodes well to also bringing forward the various technical assessments that we're planning to undertake. Now, all these projects have been fully funded with respect to our current cash balance, which is circa $8 to $9 million. We raised via a private placement in between December and February at 30 cents. We raised just over $10 million. Basically, the share price has ranged, from 40 cents down to 16 cents following the gold tape or the gold price sentiment. It's trading at around 20 cents at the moment. One thing you will notice is that a lot of the stock is subject to escrow. Now, part of that is the vendors of the assets are fundamentally an ASX-listed industrial minerals company, wanted to stay in as opposed to vending the assets out for cash or for other consideration. And the current intention is that they will ultimately distribute those shares to their own shareholders. And that's something that they took a lot of counsel on with respect to the appetite of their own shareholders. They do want to keep an exposure to our gold and copper portfolio, hence why the intention is to stay in and then distribute the shares. What it also demonstrates is, as a new company, nobody is heading for the exits. There is a legitimate medium to longer term view that everybody's taking. When you look at the EV to resource metrics, obviously management's job is to get the share price higher. The resource denominator, we are confident will continue to grow. So relative to a number of our peers, we are genuinely fair value. Some would describe us as fundamentally cheap, but all in all, there is an abundance of embedded upside with respect to the resources, and as a result, the valuation metrics. Look, in conclusion, and it's something that 20 to 25 years of experience within the team. As they say, if you've been around long enough, you get to see most things. We like to keep it simple. If you want to find gold, go where gold is found. Very simple proposition, but nonetheless, it has served us well in the past and continues to do so. PNG is a Tier 1 geological jurisdiction, multi-million ounce deposits. One aspect that people can do their own research, Allied Gold in the late 2000s is a case in point. Of more recent time, K92, mining, which is well known in the Northern Hemisphere as well. And there are a number of other examples. You can grow a company very, very quickly. And that is the advantage of being in this geological setting. The ounce count can grow quickly. It is all dependent on management's ability to execute. And that's why we have only procured members of the team who have fundamentally been there and done that on many, many occasions. We look through the lens from an investor standpoint, and our view is emerging companies must either grow or they go. You can grow organically, you can grow through merger and acquisition in due course, but you have to have an appetite and the ability to grow at a legitimate pace, because investors do not like having their capital tied up in dormant companies. Again, time is money, and that is something that we fundamentally live and breathe. Lastly, and it goes without saying, many investors have a number of these style of companies in their portfolio. We've looked at it and we've said, everybody's aspiration is for this company to be a hero, but how do you mitigate it being a zero, as some companies who embark on similar strategies in other parts of the world unfortunately experience? Well, on the one hand, we have one asset, our elephant in the jungle, that could be a game changer. To mitigate or to complement that, we have a near-term cash-producing asset. Further, there are companies in the region already mature, much larger, with existing infrastructure and capable of either acquiring our resources or projects and bolting them on to their own operations and meeting their own growth and investor relevance objectives. So fundamentally, there is an abundance of optionality for investors to consider when they're looking at this project. So from that perspective, I appreciate your time and happy to take any questions that may be asked on this call.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. If you're interested in asking a question or are logged into the GoToWebinar app or web platform, please submit your questions to us directly in the questions module. We'll now take a moment to develop the queue. Thank you. Right. First question, Frank, can you provide some additional color on the future potential of Adyton's projects?
Absolutely. And look, I think we get asked this a lot, and I'll simply turn to the regional slide that we presented previously. The one element that we looked for in these projects was the ability to grow quickly. And by grow, I mean not only add to the underlying ounce count, but to also transform or convert from an inferred resource status to an indicated and then ultimately a reserve category. I'll put it in simple terms. If we did not believe the potential was there are easier ways to make a living, and there are other projects that we would have considered. So we believe that the potential, on the basis that you remain disciplined in your exploration approach and committed to drilling and spending the money on the ground, we expect growth to be quite rapid, and we're comfortable that, or confident that a lot of the news flow over the next 4 to 6 weeks will go a long way into, demonstrating our proposition that, that's likely to occur. So from that perspective, we think the potential is significant. The gold in particular, Ferguson Island also has a silver signature, but on Feni, the unknown is the copper potential, and that's pretty exciting from where we sit at the moment.
Great. And are there any risks of mining at PNG?
Look, I think putting aside in the disclaimer that all mining has inherent risks and uncertainties, but as far as a jurisdiction, one needs to consider that within a developing economy, and one that mining is fundamental to nation building, you look at the pedigree of the projects and the billions of dollars that have been invested by large and small companies. Now, in an economy that is growing at a very, very fast pace, the only real risk that we have experienced is that the public service or the bureaucracy struggles to keep up with the underlying economic and mining activity. So is it world best practice, or is it the most efficient place to get your exploration leases granted and renewed on time, etc.? No, because they are inherently under-resourced. But as far as security of tenure and the government's commitment to attracting foreign capital and then ultimately benefiting from royalties and taxes and employment, the PNG government is aware that competition for global capital is very, very robust. So you have to do what you can to make sure that not only you can attract it and retain it, and from that perspective, we've had nothing but positive experiences, over the many years that we've operated in the region.
Great, thanks, Frank. Adyton recently announced high-grade gold intersections from drilling at the Gameta Gold Project. Can you tell us what are the next steps at the Gameta Gold Project?
Look, absolutely, and this is the one that at this stage is exceeding our expectations. We've reported 3 holes. We've probably completed 22 holes, give or take, at the moment. As they go through the lab, where the lab in PNG is probably running a week or so later than normal circumstances or a non-COVID environment. But there is an abundance of drill results coming. And again, the expectation is that it will confirm a lot of those wonderful historical grades. But we're confident enough that we're starting to look at, call it early stage scoping studies. Our belief is that this asset is something that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when somebody takes it into production. We believe we have the opportunity and the potential to look at that scenario. So we've been in the background quietly assessing some ballpark economics. Clearly, we can't announce anything until we're finished the entirety of the initial drilling program. But again, it is an asset that we expect that can be producing cash over the next three or so years. So it is in the short term. and again, we're very excited by its potential.
And since you just mentioned about producing cash, it really makes sense to jump into this next question that we received. Can you tell us when Adyton expects to move forward towards production of more cash flow?
Yeah, look, I think within PNG, it is quite a regimented development process, and one should look at it or consider it in very simple terms. 1 year, give or take, of exploration drilling, proving up the underlying resource to make sure that there is sufficient gold to include into the study. Year 2 is about doing all your baseline work, your environmental, social studies and applications, going through doing all your technical work on plant design, etc. Year 3 then is construction, development, getting into production. We already have a very good idea as to how the processing route and logistically what infrastructure is required. But nonetheless, the next 6 months post drilling, we'll fine tune a number of those assumptions and wrap some legitimately robust economics around it. But from start to finish, for a project of this characteristic, you could expect circa 3 years, and you're starting to generate cash.
Great. How much of the current land has already been drilled?
Look, on all these projects, it is literally an insignificant proportion. So it is something that we're conscious of. Our expectation on the next round of drilling is to step out and grow the targeted area of interest. The first pass of drilling is very much confirmatory, proving and demonstrating that what was reported previously is real, whilst we continue to step out. But there is an abundance. So, to use that analogy, we've only just scratched the surface on Ferguson Island and Feni. On this slide, you'll see a number of green projects, which are our, I'll call them our pipeline or early stage exploration. Now, it is not our intention to deploy any material amount of our own capital. In looking at these projects, we had been approached by a number of larger companies to get involved in earn-ins or joint ventures or whatever the case may be. With the exception of ADY, which is located on Ferguson Island, most of the other assets are very much early stage, again, highly prospective, something that we could get to in the future, but we prefer to partner and take a different approach. But with respect to Ferguson Island and Feni, there is an abundance of targets that we've clearly identified that we're yet to test, and again, that just bodes well for the future.
Great. And on that note, what are your expansion plans in the region?
Look, our expansion plans within the region, because the team is recognised as having an element of track record, we do get shown a number of projects with respect to, whether it be larger companies looking to divest or whatever the case may be. The beauty of our portfolio is that it is of sufficient quality that we don't have to jump on the first bus that comes along. We can focus on our own projects to really understand what the underlying opportunity or potential truly resides. But one can never say never. We are unashamedly an organisation with high growth aspirations. As I alluded to, junior companies, you grow or you go. So I suspect over the next 6 months we'll assess what we've got and keep an eye on the horizon in respect to tier one, globally recognised mineral jurisdictions.
Thanks, Frank. We'll take one more question. And what is the status of U.S. listing? Has the 15C211 application been completed and filed?
Yeah, look, we're in the process. We expect to have our OTC listing completed over the next 4 to 5 weeks. We did have the advantage of most of our filings with respect to our TSX Ventures listing were, the ink hadn't quite dried, so they were still very applicable to the OTC listing and quotation process. So, we have experienced an abundance of interest from investors in North America, obviously Canada, and in Europe. We're currently listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. That was largely a compliance process or a complementary listing to the TSXV. But the OTC listing, it's something that investors have encouraged us to do. Both existing shareholders and prospective investors. It's something that we're probably 3/4 of the way through, and I'd imagine it'll be completed circa by 30 June.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar recording will soon be made available on the Adyton website. If you have any additional questions that have not been addressed on this webinar, please feel free to email us at adyton@rbmilestone.com. Again, that's adyton@rbmilestone.com. Thanks again. You're now free to disconnect.